Welcome to episode 3 of Captain's Vlog, the podcast aimed at Clipper race crew in training and published by fierceturtle.co.uk, an independent blog for Clipper crew. We are independent and have no links or associations with the Clipper race, Clipper Ventures or Clipper training. So to get on from that little bit of a disclaimer, first of all, I thought we'd talk today about Leg 5, pros and cons. I've done blogs on Legs 1 to 4, pros and cons in the past, and I've been asked several times to continue with the remaining legs to give you an indication of what I felt personally were the pros and cons of each leg. So I've decided to do the rest of these by podcast, primarily because it's easier for you to access and easier for me to deliver and publish. So please, I hope this is useful. If you have any comments, then you can comment on the Anchor FM app. Just download that to your smartphone and you can send me a comment. Alternatively, you can comment on YouTube, where these are published on the Fierce Turtle YouTube channel. So feel free to interact and share your own views of Leg 5 as well. So pros and cons. Well, first of all, Leg 5, what does it normally cover? I mean, this does vary from race to race, but in large part, Leg 5 is a race from the east coast of Australia, going north through Cyclone Alley, as it is rather worryingly called, through into the tropics and through the doldrums. It is, as you might expect, primarily a very warm leg because it stays in the tropics for most of the way across to China, which is the sort of the Asian area is where it finishes on most races. It used to finish in Singapore, and in the past it stopped in other locations in that area. It's been Hong Kong and China, various ports, and there are, as of the time of this podcast, now 3 important Chinese sponsors. So the idea that the race is not going to go to the east coast of China anytime soon is probably unlikely, but that's well above any sort of information that I have personally. It's a long race. It is traversing the Coral Sea, the Solomon Sea, the South Pacific, goes through the Sulu Sea and the Celebes Sea. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I've been there a couple of times. Into the South China Sea before it finishes normally in one of the Chinese ports. Now, that's a long old race. It's in a warm part of the world. Once you're through Cyclone Alley, which obviously has to be managed carefully by the race committee, and so to make sure that there's no building cyclones when the race leaves. But once you're through that area, you're into sort of doldrums style weather for a large part of the race, although it can vary depending on the season and of course on your latitude. The course varies, but as I say, it normally ends up, eventually it's going to end up in the South Pacific and then through some smaller seas and into the South China Sea to finish. The advantage, as I see it at the moment, is that Leg 5 is now more likely, and this is only speculation on my part, to end up being split into several races, and I think that is a definite pro. Because if you are only doing one leg and for some reason your boat has an issue or a crew member is taken ill or injured and you have to abandon the race temporarily in order to deliver them to safety, then that's your race pretty much done. And if that's your only race, then of course that is pretty frustrating. So I think the fact that Leg 5 may now lend itself to being split into several different races is definitely a bonus. That means you've got more than one bite at the cherry to get your moment of glory on the rostrum. So that's a pro. What else is a pro? Well, if you're not a cold water or a sort of a cold environment person, then definitely Leg 5 is one for you because it is a warm warm leg. Because of its location near the equator, you are talking about very warm weather. In fact, for me, sometimes unbearably warm conditions above deck and below deck. Of course, you're on a race boat, so above deck you're not going to have any obvious shelter, and with the sun so high, you just need to be able to prepare for that and make sure that you have the right kit. So it's got to be UV protection, it's got to be wicking kit that is going to be comfortable to wear, you're going to be very warm, it needs to dry quickly because you'll have lots of rain squalls and rain showers and what have you. So it is something you have to manage for in terms of clothing. You probably want a lightweight shower jacket and some quick drying shorts, and as I say, it's not a problem being cold, but it is a problem getting wet, and then once you're wet, if it gets windy, you will get cold, especially at night. So it's important that you manage that. But it is warm, and therefore, for some people that will be a real bonus. The other thing, which is potentially a pro or a con, depending on what you're looking for out of the race, is that it's most likely that this is one of the races where you will see much less in the way of big seas. You're not going to see the big following seas that you get in the Southern Ocean when you're racing down in the roaring 40s. So from that perspective, it's not quite as extreme. You don't get the same sort of surfs and boat speeds that you get in other oceans, but at the same time it is quite challenging because you've got lots of light airs and then squalls, and if anybody who sails knows that actually sailing a boat, especially a heavy boat, in light airs is much harder than sailing it quickly in heavy airs. So in terms of sailing skills and also in terms of tactics and the speed at which your crew can do evolutions, like changing spinnakers, you are looking at leg 5 as being a real challenge. So it's definitely a challenging leg for that, from a tactical perspective and also from a crew efficiency perspective. And that, of course, is a pro if you're looking for a challenge. Another added bonus, which is everybody has their own reasons for doing the race, but it is nice that it's almost certain that you're going to be starting somewhere exotic on the east coast of Australia, and you're going to be ending up somewhere pretty exotic, certainly for those of us from Western Europe and the States, in Asia. So that's an advantage. You go through some parts of the world that are pretty remote and rarely seen by most people. So sailing through the Solomon Sea is a pretty special experience. It is very much, I've been through there twice and felt it was otherworldly. The charts are fairly limited, and the whole place is just, it's a very, there's volcanoes, and there's you're on the Papua New Guinea coast for a while, and it is just pretty surreal place. Not a lot going on there, and it's very beautiful. So that is certainly an advantage, and you're probably going to end up finishing somewhere pretty exotic. You're also going to sail through some fairly well-known waters that are well, if you listen to the press, teeming with pirates. There is a piracy risk in South China Sea and in the Sulu and Celebes seas, although in my experience the piracy risk is very much more driven towards large shipping. It's a professional operation primarily driven by the desire to create or gain other people's money. So a well-crewed yacht travelling within sight or VHF distance perhaps of other well-crewed yachts is on balance less likely to find itself having a problem. There are ways of dealing with piracy threat, and the Clipper Race have got quite a lot of experience of this, and as far as I'm aware there's never been any issues with that side of things. It does add a little frisson to everything else, having to travel through these areas, but it's not, in my experience anyway, it's nothing like sort of Somalia, which is very much more a both financially driven and politically driven, and of course all the other troubles in the world at the moment. It's a much scarier part of the world. So it tends to be, I think, that piracy in most parts of that part of the world are driven almost like on-water muggings rather than any more nefarious motives. So yeah, so that's an element of the race, but it's not a significant one. Its cons, certainly for me anyway, I'm not really extreme heat. I don't really get on with very much, and you will experience extreme heat on leg 5. It's very, very warm. Below deck, the deck head tends to radiate the heat into the boat. You've got a lot of hot, sweaty people trying to sleep below during the day and in the evening, and it's very difficult to sleep. I found it almost impossible to sleep during the day, and that can mean that the boat, because it's under pressure with sail changes and all the other pressures that you have during a race and when you're traveling across an ocean, it can have quite an impact on crew. So if you have any weaknesses or friction, abrasive characters within your crew, then it is likely that the warm weather of leg 5 is going to highlight those issues. So it's very much something that crews on that race should be bearing in mind, and just making sure that everybody just winds their neck in a little bit and is a bit more concerned about other people's well-being, certainly on this leg. You're not going to get the same sort of big surfs and surfing that you'd get in the Southern Ocean or the North Pacific, so if you're looking for that sort of thing, you're better to go to one of the higher latitude races. And it's relatively light airs. That is a pro and a con. It's challenging. You're going to be doing a lot of sail changes, and you're going to be probably using a lot of spinnaker and changing spinnakers a lot when you can to get the most out of them. So it's going to be challenging in that respect. And as I say, you're going to go through all sorts of different conditions dependent on what's actually happening. In the 13-14 race, when I was on leg 5, we actually ended up beating into 25 knots plus of wind for quite a long period of time, which was quite unusual given where we were. But that sort of thing can happen, of course. So yeah, it will definitely be a challenge, but for probably slightly different reasons than leg 3 or leg 6, which are perhaps a little bit more high testosterone, and for those that are seeking out huge waves and massive boat speeds. So that's pretty much it for leg 5. The only other thing I'd say about leg 5, obviously it's a long way to travel from Western Europe, so it's going to add expense if you're just doing one leg. And I know a lot of people actually add a few legs together so that they end up coming back from Australia to the UK, which is great if you can do that, if you can afford the time and the money, because it means that you've done half a circumnavigation effectively, and in mileage terms probably done almost an entire circumnavigation of the radius of the globe. So it's quite nice to sort of tail end the race that way, and you then get to do other legs as well, so you see the whole gamut of different experiences. Make sure that you, in terms of top tips, I would definitely suggest, without a doubt, that you bring along with you your own personal fan, sort of just a small fan. That you can buy them for probably a tenner from Amazon. They clamp onto the bunk above you or somewhere suitable, and if you plug that into a decent battery pack, one of these 30,000 milliamp battery packs, that's going to give you quite a lot of time. You can recharge it when necessary, and it's going to give you cool or cooler air on your face, which is, I found, the only way that you could actually get off to sleep. And not being able to sleep in warm conditions for a long period of time when you're working hard, it is pretty draining, certainly for me. So make sure you invest in one of those. Some of the boats will also invest in larger fans, which they'll install to try and keep air moving down below deck. We had them on my boat when we did it in 13-14. Also in the 11-12 we had them. Different boat design, of course, between the 68s and the 70s. And on the 70s I found that trying to move air around the accommodation area was pretty difficult, whereas on the 68s, putting a great big fan up near where the life jackets are normally hung helped to blow air through the boat and actually vented it quite well. So yeah, your skippers will have different ideas, which I'm sure they'll discuss with you. It's important that you keep as clean as possible. It's going to be difficult because of, obviously, water will be in demand, and it may be that you, for some reason, you have a problem with your water maker or something like that. So if that happens, you're not going to be able to wash with fresh water, and washing with salt water, unless you rinse afterwards with fresh, is just not feasible because you just get all sticky and salty. So make sure that you whenever you get the opportunity to wash, normally in rain squalls, make sure that if you're on deck that you get the opportunity to strip down quickly and get a bit of soap out and have a wash. Makes a big difference to how you feel, and makes a big difference to the possibility of getting infections, things like eye infections, stuff like that. If you wear contact lenses, be very, very careful, because introducing infections into your eye, that part of the world, you're a long way from help. And whilst the boats carry antibiotics, it's really, you don't want to have the misery of carrying some sort of infection on that leg. Otherwise, I think probably, I'm sure there's plenty of other things that people would suggest. You're not going to need a heavyweight sleeping bag. You will probably want something to lie on, because if you're hot bunking, you don't really want to lie in somebody else's sweat on that bunk. So some sort of base, and I used to turn my ocean bag inside out so that I was lying on the bobbles, but I left it open. Some sort of little privacy screen is not a bad idea, some sort of silk privacy screen that you can hang across your bunk, just so that you can lie there with less clothing on and not have to expose yourself to everybody else on the boat. And it just allows you to cool a little bit more and allows the sweat on your body to evaporate and keep you cooler. Maybe a lightweight sheet, very lightweight cotton or silk or something like that, that you could just wear over you on a night when you're off watch at night, just to keep the chill off you. Make sure you've got plenty of UV protective clothing, so long-armed wicking tops. Make sure that you're thinking about the sun. The sun is very, very hot in that area, and you don't want to get sunstroke or sunburn or anything like that. So be thinking about that. And yeah, just direct your thoughts basically to the fact that you're probably going to end up with temperatures approaching 40 degrees centigrade down below deck during the day, and so think about how you could best live and sleep and generally exist in those temperatures. And when you're on deck, you're going to be in the blazing sun near the equator, so it's going to be very, very warm, and you need to be well protected with a decent sun hat, probably two in case you lose one, because otherwise you are going to be in big trouble without a hat in that area. That's about it, I think, for leg 5. I would say it's a challenging leg. It's more challenging than perhaps some people think looking at it, because they think, well, it hasn't got all the big waves and everything else necessarily that the leg 3 and leg 6 has got, but it has got other challenges, which I hope I've sort of highlighted for you. And it's a rewarding leg. It's great if you like seeing parts of the world and seeing exotic locations. If you don't like the cold, it's definitely a leg for you. And it's really part of the rich tapestry, which is the Clipper Round the World Yacht Race. So if you're doing leg 5 or thinking of signing up for leg 5, I hope this has been of some help, and I'm sure that plenty of other crew, former and existing, will have their own ideas, and please do share them either on the Anchor FM app or alternatively on YouTube, where there's a comment section open. Thanks very much for listening, and speak to you again soon.